So yes, today, friends, we are going to be talking about the full moon in Libra 3. We're going to be breaking down the sun in Aries 3 and all the significations associated with that. We're going to talk about Mars hosting from Cancer and all the things that we need to break down with Mars contributing its resources to the sun. We'll talk about the moon in Libra 3 and talk about all the equilibrium that we need to bring about, the balance that we're trying to strive for, and the maintenance that we are looking to bring to our experiences. We'll talk about the fixed star Spica today a little bit as well. We will also discuss sort of how the full moon is going to unfold over a number of weeks and just see if we can contextualize it with our lived experiences and with our stories. So a couple announcements yet again. So sorry for those of you who are listening in, we had some audio difficulties earlier in the show. Thank you, Mercury retrograde in Pisces, but here we go. So friends, you can find me over at spencermichaud.com if you need to reach out for personal assistance. I have all sorts of offerings, readings, etc., natal readings, transit readings, classes that you can sign up for, tutoring sessions. You find all of that at the Book Now button at spencermichaud.com. I have a webinar that's coming up pretty soon. We have the Dignity and Devotion webinar with my beautiful partner, Tanya Andrews. It's called Dignity and Devotion Mars. We're going to be talking about all the things related to Mars. We're going to be talking about Mars moving through its different domiciles, its stabilities. We're going to talk about remediation for all of those things. We're going to talk about creating a magical practice with Mars, a devotional practice. Sometimes creating a devotional practice to a planet was traditionally thought to help propitiate that deity so that we could avoid some of the challenging aspects that planet could bring. With Mars, we often have a lot of challenging aspects. So creating a devotional practice can really be beneficial when we're working with the planet with Mars. So that's going to be Saturday, April the 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern, a week from tomorrow. So I hope that you, as I'm recording this, so I hope that you'll sign up for that. You can also visit Tanya over at Third Coast Mojo, where she has some wonderful things on offering. You just saw that we had Mercury retrograde in Pisces kind of rearing its head and like cutting us off from the ability to communicate clearly. Well, one of the things that Tanya's magical business does is that she will try to capture the essence of a planet at its best. And here you see Mercury in Virgo, Mercury in its exaltation, which sometimes when you're wearing this type of material, this can help to mitigate some of the challenges when Mercury or any other planet is in a difficult position like it is today. So go check her out over at Third Coast Mojo on Etsy. It's really great stuff. I probably should have slathered more of it on today, but maybe it was helping us get to the solution much quicker than otherwise. But please go support her over at Third Coast Mojo. You can also subscribe to my newsletter where you can get a 10% discount on anything that I offer, class or whatnot, or reading. And you will be able to get updates on when I'm going live, when classes are going to be offered, and sometimes there's links to different articles about astrological topics, etc. So I hope that you'll sign up for that. That's a great way to stay in touch and get a discount. You can also support the channel by buying a super chat here on YouTube live here today with a little $sign in the chat, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com to support the channel. And this really goes a long way to helping me to keep the lights on here. This is something where we're using those resources to purchase lights, equipment, books, the time necessary to do all of this work and to create these broadcasts each week. It also helps me to get books like one we're going to talk about today, The Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer. We're going to talk about the gift economy and reciprocity today in relationship to the Libra full moon. And this is a great way to create our own little kind of ecosystem here where by supporting the channel, I will come and distill the information that you've allowed me to acquire and hopefully share that with you and hopefully enrich your life as well. So it's a great way to just keep energy circulating between us. All right, friends, there we go. That's the quick and dirty announcements. Thank you for letting me go through that again. We've got some nice friends stopping in here. Thank you so much for alerting me to the Mercury retrograde challenges. But I just want to welcome friends here. Taria is here. Thank you, Taria. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Ani. Thank you, Dragonfly369. Thank you, Stephen, Jupiterian. I appreciate all of you being here today. Tom says just an April Fool's joke on us, a little bit late, right? Um, so yes, thank you so much for hanging out and for helping me understand what needs to happen here. And yes, if any of you are lip readers, Steven says that would have been a great way to. I hope that you wouldn't have to read my lips for the entire broadcast, but we're back, friends, and we're gonna we're gonna get through it together. Okay. Ani says, I'm on a Mercury devotional mission. Can't wait to add the new Virgo oil. K2 is sitting on my lot of fortune in Virgo, and it is ruled by Mercury and Pisces. Help. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I can't recommend the Mercury and Virgo oil and materia enough. I use it almost daily, and it's really great stuff for helping to mitigate some challenging placements. I have Mercury retrograde in Cancer in the 12th house, so it really does help me to formulate my thoughts and to get things from point A to point B, right? And to point C, which is delivering it to all of you. All right, so thank you so much for stopping in, friends. We didn't get to hang out last week. I had a little bit of a vacation. During the time off, Tanya and I started planning out our garden. We're going to be doing a lot of gardening this year, trying to restore more native habitat in our yard, but also to grow food and medicinal herbs. And some of those medicinal herbs are going to go into some of the products for Third Coast Mojo. So we've got our plates full for the spring already. I don't know about all of you, but it feels like Jupiter and Gemini, it takes one project and it expands it into like 10 to 12 other ones. And that's what it feels like lately. When I finally feel like I'm nearing the end of one project, it's like it has it's gotten wet at midnight like a gremlin, and it's multiplied into 12 more. So I'm not upset about it. I think that when you get to do things like gardening and growing your own food and things of that nature, those are the nice things, right? That's not something to stress about. That's something to just embrace and enjoy with the process. I will say there is time pressure that comes with things like that. If you want the most bountiful harvest, etc. And that's something that astrology can help us with, is the right timing for things. But I think when it really comes down to it, a lot of the deadlines that we impose are self-imposed, and the anxiety that we create around things are also self-imposed anxieties. And that's not to diminish the real anxieties that we might feel out in the world, but this is something that I'm working on personally as a very Virgo-heavy person with 3 planets in Virgo. I have Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn there. Sometimes I feel this time pressure where it's manufactured. And I've been reading a lot today in the Serviceberry book by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Should do a book club on this, about manufactured scarcity. And the manufactured scarcity sometimes that we create in our own lives is a scarcity of time. Oftentimes we have a lot more time than we think we do. Sometimes we have a lot less time. It just depends on your perspective. But I think that when we align ourselves with natural rhythms, there will be a time and a space for everything. There will be a time to take action. There'll be a time to rest. There'll be a time to enjoy the fruits of our labors, and there will be a time to labor. So understanding where we're at astrologically can help us with that. So I'll try to help you break that down today. So full moon in Libra 3. Let's just take a look a little bit at the chart, and I'm going to share my screen over here. One moment. So here is our full moon in Libra 3. And this is happening on April the 12th, which happens to be the day of our Mars webinar. So we're going to be doing our Mars webinar on the full moon on Spica. Hopefully it will go well. This full moon has some interesting elements to it. You can see that we are dealing with the Sun in Aries 3. Okay. And we've got the moon in Libra 3. And all of that is going to be squared by Mars. So this is the full moon phase of our new moon solar eclipse in Aries. So we might have started and initiated a number of new things. I know, like I was saying, for my partner and I, we've initiated some pretty intense outdoor projects and some things associated with our home and trying to create more, I guess you could call it self-sufficiency. I think that being less dependent on food miles and food moving from long distances and being able to create our own abundance, I would say that is very Aries new moon solar eclipse. That being said, this full moon is sort of a balancing element to all of that. It reminds us that we do not live in a vacuum, that all flourishing is mutual, okay, which is the kind of the big tagline on the back of the Serviceberry book. It teaches us that everybody and everything lives in relationship. And even when we're starting down a path of independence, starting down a path of greater personal sovereignty, we cannot forget that we live in relationship with others, with our community. Because when we become too isolated, when we become too enamored by the illusion of radical individualism, we actually start hastening our own demise. And the manufactured scarcity that we see within market economies leads to actual scarcity because of an abuse of the gifts of Mother Earth, or you could call them natural resources, but Robin Wall Kimmerer chooses to call them earthly gifts in the Serviceberry. And I think thinking of things in that way helps us to understand that if we become good stewards of our relationships, our sacred relationships, not only with each other as human beings, but with the natural world, with our plant brothers and sisters, with our animal brothers and sisters, then we can help perpetuate abundance rather than hasten insecurity. So this to me is a really important full moon for that. Now, a couple things to think about with this. First of all, April 7th is a really interesting date because Mars is going to be moving back in bounds. And I think that we've been dealing with a really challenging Mars transit at least since December, right? It probably started slightly earlier than that, but since December, we had an out-of-bounds Mars that was in its fall in Cancer, a place where it is not functioning at its highest, most best quality. The resources that it has to work with or work within are things that we would normally expect security from. The way we look at traditional astrology is a set of relationships. It's a set of relationships between planet and which the ancients considered a Greek god or a deity. It doesn't have to be Greek, it could be just a deity. And the temples or territories that they were responsible for. And each of these gods visit other deities' temples. So Mars was visiting the moon's temple. And the moon's temple, think about all the things that the moon rules, our comfort, our bodies, our sense of security, our sense of home. A lot of the conflict that we've been experiencing, the martial tendency towards conflict, towards severing, towards separating, which in the right context is necessary. Okay, so that's the key. Mars is not necessarily quote unquote good or bad. It serves an essential function, just like certain things in our natural ecosystems serve essential functions. One of the animals today that we're going to talk about serves an essential function. It can be an animal that is irritating, that we may consider something that is negative, but it serves a purpose. It serves a recycling purpose. And Mars is a similar type of role. So when Mars is functioning at its highest, it's only severing and separating that which is necessary, and doing so in a way that is considered. With Mars in Cancer, we have Mars severing and separating in a place from where we would look to for home security. And a lot of things we've been seeing in the news cycle are people being removed from their homes. okay, which is a horrific experience for probably for anybody. But to see this happening on a global scale, or at least on a national scale from where I'm at, it is very painful to witness. We also are seeing the Mars express itself in the cost of goods and services that we rely on, inflating and creating battles, trade wars because of wanting to hoard, and that can be painful. We also have seen during the Mars out of bounds period a return to the ideal of manifest destiny, of territory expansion, of neo-colonialism, I guess you could call it, where there's literally been threats of stealing someone else's home. So this is a Mars that is out of control, right? That is out of bounds. It is not functioning in the way that Mars would normally function. And yes, as Aaron is pointing out, all the federal servants being fired is another example. Exactly. Like the indiscriminate severing and cutting away is an out of bounds Mars, right? So what I'm feeling about the return to Mars inbounds is at least some glimmer of hope that we are going to be returning to some level of sanity. Now, I know that this is idealistic based on the circumstances that we may find ourselves in socially and politically right now, and the leadership that is in control of the situation. But leadership is beholden to the same astrological forces that citizens are. So if we have, think of it like this, if you have a planet that is influencing, I believe that the planets influence us. Some people would say that a planet creates destiny, and in some cases you would be right. In other cases, there is it's sort of like the angel or the devil on your shoulder, right? It's whispering you to take some actions. And in this case, Mars has been whispering in the ears of power, saying, hey, wouldn't it be great to grab more? Wouldn't it be great to cut this? Wouldn't it be great to sever this so that we can benefit in this other area? And if that voice starts to change or starts to calm down, or if there are counter forces that arise to push back on those things, and I'm thinking of like the senator that recently did a 25-hour speech / filibuster, Cory Booker. I'm thinking about the legal system starting to push back, judges in America starting to slow down some of the radical changes that have been implemented. Those could be indications of Mars coming back in bounds, where the indiscriminate cutting is not going to be as prevalent. So I would say take some solace in this full moon that Mars will be inbounds. Now, that being said, Mars is still square this lunation. And as a few people are pointing out, that's sort of the elephant in the room. So Ani has a comment here. Full moon on Spica is the most auspicious way, in the best way, I'd like to think. Really looking forward to this lunation to bring us back to our good sense and get along with each other after last eclipse. Absolutely. I do think that there is an auspicious element with the moon on Spica. Well, we will break down Spica in more depth here in a minute, Ani. But Spica is considered a very fortunate fixed star, a gift. Spica is the star in Virgo. Okay, it's even though we have the moon in Libra, the constellation Virgo is overlapped with the tropical house of Libra at this point because of a concept called precession, where the zodiac appears to move backwards over time against the backdrop of fixed stars. So what we have is Spica is a star in the bundle of wheat that the Virgin holds, which is a source of abundance, a source of a gift that the Mother Earth gives us, that sustains us. So there is associations with gifts. There's association with talent, of being very skilled in some regard as well with this fixed star. It's also called the Stella Maris, which was the guide for sailors to lead them to their destination. So all of those things are positive. The other thing that I would say that is very positive about this full moon is the moon itself is hosted by an exalted Venus. Now, Venus in Pisces. Venus will be stationing direct on this day as well, which is another positive association. So some definitely good things, but there is that elephant in the room is the square with Mars. So we'll try to contextualize that. And Aaron is saying this Mars retrograde has been so gnarly. Also, hi, Spencer and all. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing well too, Aaron. Yeah, it has been a pretty gnarly Mars retrograde. Although I will say this. There are benefits to Mars, even in Cancer, even retrograde. Like in my experience, we've been fixing a number of things in our home. And the Mars, the fear, I guess you could say, or the observation, I don't even know if it's fear, it's just the observation of the changing circumstances of our political climate has sort of lit a fire under my family to start doing more gardening projects, growing more food, fixing our home. Like we have a very old home that is always in need of various repairs. It's a 140-year-old home where we bought it after years of neglect. So there's kind of a laundry list of things, and this has really encouraged us to kind of take some extra steps towards that. So sometimes Mars can goad us into action. So one thing to keep in mind with that, and it's not always comfortable, but sometimes it's necessary. And yeah, Aaron is talking about the federal civil servants being fired. Another example of Mars out of bounds. Absolutely. Ani says, is the Mars square going to wreck this lovely full moon? I don't think that it will wreck something. It may only wreck your idealized vision of what this lunation could be. I think what I have noticed when we have competing interests in a chart is that there will be some areas of our life that are unmitigatingly positive, but there may be other areas of our life that are challenging. I think that we fall into the trap of thinking of things on this scale, this linear scale of good or bad, black or white, positive or negative. And I don't necessarily think that reality works that way. I think that we often simultaneously have challenging things going on while the best things are happening as well. I can see this coming with Jupiter and Cancer being squared to Saturn and Aries. You know, I'm anticipating, if our projects come to fruition, I'm anticipating creating abundance, enough to share with my neighbors. But it could also be in the context of great scarcity within our community. But here's how I choose to look at that. Let's say that I have created abundance, but yet there's a challenging social circumstance. Well, I'm really grateful that I was able to create abundance. I'm grateful that Jupiter was in Cancer to create that abundance to help mitigate some of the social challenges of Saturn and Aries. What if we had Saturn and Aries creating conflict or creating scarcity without the help of Jupiter and Cancer? So it's the same type of rationalization could be applied to this full moon, Ani. We could say that, well, Mars is ruining everything. Mars may be creating some challenge. But since we have the moon on a very fortunate fixed star, isn't that much better than if we didn't have that at all, right? See what I'm saying? Like, if we didn't have the moon on Spica at all, if we had that Mars, like with let's say I don't know, a Capricorn moon or something like that, right? Where the moon is in its exile, then we'd be dealing with a moon-Mars opposition, and we wouldn't have any help from the moon conjoining Spica. So it's all relative. It is all an interconnected tapestry, mycelial network, if you will, of planetary experiences. So I would encourage you, Ani, to try to think of it in that tapestry. That doesn't mean that we won't experience some hardship. And if you are experiencing hardship right now, I'm sorry to hear that, and we'll try to be a beacon of light in the darkness for you. Aaron says this full moon is conjunct my natal Mars. Oh my goodness. So this will be a fun one for you, Aaron. So it'll bring out all of the qualities of that Mars and all of the challenges that you may have been working throughout your entire narrative. But it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to work with that energy, and maybe to remediate it. Ani says the generation of Pluto conjunct Spica is probably going to notice a hopeful shift. Mars be damned. I hope so. I'm part of that generation. I don't know if my Pluto is exactly conjunct Spica, but it's around that area. So I hope that there will be something positive that comes from this. Yeah. Okay. So full moon in Libra 3. I think we've acknowledged Mars. Now Mars is hosting the sun, and this is a relationship where Mars is trying to provide resources for the sun in Aries, and we'll break down what that might mean in a second. But let me just run through very quickly some of the qualities of this. So we have our full moon in Libra 3, 23 degrees Libra on the 12th of April. We've got the sun in Aries 3, hosted by Mars at 27 degrees of Cancer, square to the sun and the moon. The moon is in Libra 3, conjunct Spica. The host of that moon is Venus retrograde at 24 degrees of Pisces in aversion, but also stationing direct, a very powerful moment for Venus. It could be something where good fortune starts flowing once again. It is going to be conjoining Saturn, so that could concretize our dream and our vision. We'll talk about that in a second. It could also mean the end of something, so something to consider with that. The full moon is, of course, squared Mars at 27 degrees of Cancer, so again, we've touched on that. Chiron and Neptune are also co-present with the sun. Chiron is an asteroid that often is associated with medicine, but also wisdom, learning, teaching. But most often you'll hear it associated with a wound that is difficult to heal. Chiron was a centaur that was a teacher, a musician, a healer, but he sustained a wound. I believe it was from one of Hercules' poisoned arrows. And he had a real difficulty for the rest of his days with this wound that would not heal. So we may be also feeling a wound, especially related to our solar consciousness, which I will talk about when we talk about the sun in Aries. This full moon is also has the component of Jupiter being trine the moon, so by whole sign. So that is a positive indication for good fortune, with Jupiter making positive aspects to both the sun and the moon. It's going to be sextiling the sun and trining the moon. Always helpful when a benefic planet is making a positive aspect to a lunation. Venus retrograde is going to be conjoining Saturn. We've talked about this a little bit already, with potential completions happening, but also concretization of a vision. Pisces 3 is a very emotional decan where we can have wild swings of emotion, but we can have visionary qualities. The tarot card associated with that is the 10 of Cups, where we see a rainbow and this kind of temporary but beautiful vision of this combination of water and light. So oftentimes before we can manifest, we have to have a beautiful vision for it. Just as an example, at the end of Pisces season, while all these things were starting to stack up and the sun was moving through that, in our house, we were starting to make plans for what we wanted to do for the spring, as far as like what we wanted to fix, what we wanted to grow for the season. We did a lot of visioning and planning. And as Aries season started, we pressed the go button. We bought a number of seeds. Like we bought a lot of seeds. So we're going to start a lot of things from seed. We have some grow lights and plant shelves and things like that. So some things will be started indoors, some things will be started outdoors, depending on what it is. And hopefully that will help us to create, again, enough abundance to share, maybe even to share some native plant starts with our neighbors or things of that nature, or if we grow enough food, to share food with our neighbors. This is how we become good reciprocal citizens of our communities. So this Venus retrograde conjoining Saturn is showing the concretization of some of that visioning that you might have done in late February, early March. Mercury is also going to be conjoining the North Node at its maximum degree of fall, but direct. So this is Mercury in a place that is challenging for it. That, as we demonstrated earlier in the broadcast today, when we started the show without being able to hear each other, like there was a setting that wasn't correct in the audio. Sometimes Mercury has difficulty delivering a message. And when it's conjoined the North Node, sometimes it can increase the challenges of delivering that message. So be very careful at this full moon that you are delivering your messages, or that they are received and received clearly. I think that is something that's very important as we see Mercury conjoining the North Node, is that you really don't want to make an assumption that what you said was interpreted the way that you meant it. You want to get feedback on that, and you want to get confirmation. Sometimes double checking with that can really save you from a number of hassles moving forward. So those are the kind of the main things that we're looking at with the full moon. So what I will do is I'll break it down piece by piece. I'm just going to check in with the comments section here today. Stephen's taking off. Have a good weekend, Stephen. So we're going to start out with the Sun in Aries 3. So what we will do, I always like starting with the Sun when we talk about full moons, because to me, the Sun is the sort of the canvas and the spotlight, the focal point that we're going to be painting on. This is a collective, conscious experience that we're having. The lunar experience is sometimes below the surface. Sometimes it's something where we see the manifestation of a conscious dream or directive that the Sun is providing, because the moon is collecting the light of the Sun. So we have to understand what the impetus that is coming from the Sun is. And in this case, we have the Sun in Aries 3, the third 10-degree section of Aries, that is syncretized with the Four of Wands card. And here you see a figure, two figures actually, who are celebrating some kind of achievement. This is a card of oasis. It is a resting place before a much longer journey. We've just started the new solar journey, and we've initiated something at Aries season, and this will be the kind of a temporary respite. This is a Venus-ruled decan in a Mars-ruled sign. So we may have been experiencing the martial energy necessary to get moving on our projects in the first decan and say, hey, we got to burst through the soil like a seed to be able to start receiving the energy of the Sun. Second decan, those leaves start to get established, right? They start to branch out. We're making royal decrees in that decan. We're kind of saying, hey, this is who I am, rather than this is who I am not. Okay, the first decan often sees us rejecting things that we are not, separating from the umbilical cord, separating from the collective. When we have the Aries 3 energy, Aries 3 energy being Venusian. So we go Mars, Sun, Venus for the decan order for Aries. Now we've established our territory, we've established the rules, and now we're trying to win people over to our point of view. Okay? And we've learned that sometimes might doesn't always make right. If you experience conflicts with others because you've been too abrasive or you've been too aggressive, this is an opportunity, Sun in Aries 3, to actually try to win them over with grace, with humor, with communication, with sex appeal, I guess, is something associated with this decan. So themes to think about with Aries 3, where the Sun is in this full moon: setting hearts aflame, gaining a following, sex appeal, seduction, erotic desire. All of those significations come from the spirit that inhabits this decan, from a fragmentary Hellenistic text called 36 Heirs of the Zodiac. In this case, it is Eros, who had gold-tipped arrows that when you were struck with them inflamed desire. He also had lead-tipped arrows that when you were struck with them created repulsion. So we have to be careful that the energy that we're sharing is one of attraction rather than repulsing. Although there are certain situations where we might want to repulse attention, that we might want to drive away unwanted attention. Temporary refuges and fleeting passions. Think about Venus in Aries for this decan, where it's in its exile. It's usually a planet that thrives when it allows things to come to it. But in Aries, it's more aggressive about pursuing what it desires. And those desires can flame up very quickly, and they can also burn out very quickly. So we have to be careful of like pursuing a desire that is temporary. Fleeting passions, right? Hesed and Atziluth is the Kabbalistic Sephira associated with this. And that's a Jupiter Sephira in the Kabbalistic tree of life. And it really talks about an abundance of inspiration. If you think about fire as inspiration in this system, we're just accumulating all this inspiration. We're just bursting with enthusiasm, right? I've met people with this decan that are just very enthusiastic, and their enthusiasm is contagious, like fire is contagious, like it catches, right? It just needs fuel to burn. And sometimes our attention is the fuel. I have an Aries friend who, you give him attention and he will it's like life to him. Like he will use that attention and he will get even more animated, which I find sometimes I used to find it challenging, but now I find it endearing, because enthusiasm is sometimes it's a rare commodity in the world, especially enthusiasm for things that people love. There are all sorts of ways that people have enthusiasm for things that they don't like and for things that they hate, and they can get animated about that. And I'm sure that there are people that utilize this decan to those ends. But when we see someone who is enthusiastic about something that they love and want to share that love with you, that is very attractive. So charisma, glamour magic, dramatic abilities, winning over the hostile crowd. You could also consider the sun in this decan as related to a motivational speaker, or someone who is trying to rally the troops towards victory. Think of a sports team that is down at halftime, and they get a rousing, fiery, passionate speech from the coach, and then they take that energy out into the field and they come back and win the game. That's the energy of this decan as well. So questions to ask yourself about the sun in Aries 3 in relationship to the Libra 3 moon. How can you tap into your personal magnetism to motivate or attract? How can you use diplomacy and tact to get what you want rather than brute force, right? And that's probably going to be very important with the moon in Libra too, because we may have to compromise a little bit at this full moon. How can you celebrate who you've become? In this tarot card, we see a celebration. We see a celebration of selfhood, of hard-fought selfhood, potentially. So how can you celebrate and give yourself a victory dance, I guess, for the progress that you've made so far, while also understanding that it is not necessarily an ending. It's just celebrating being able to begin something. If I take the metaphor of my own gardening project, planting the seed is not the last step in cultivating a garden. There's a lot of work that goes into it. There's maintenance, there's watering, there's weeding, there's harvesting, there's transplanting. All of those things are part of a longer journey. But celebrating the ability to start and appreciating each stage of the journey is something that Aries 3 can teach us as well. What methods might inspire people to see things your way? I'm a believer that you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, right? That may not necessarily be true physically, because I do know that sour things do attract fruit flies, which is interesting. We'll talk about that later. But I do think that there is something to be said about utilizing your social graces to create cooperation rather than bludgeoning someone over the head with your demands. And eventually, you may be successful for a temporary period of time if you utilize those other more aggressive methods. But what you will do is you will eventually seed your own downfall, because you have created an imbalance in the power dynamic. You've created a circumstance where one person wins, you, and the other person loses. And eventually, because everything is reciprocal, you will be the loser. You are seeding the seeds of your own usurpation, I guess. When you utilize your brute force to usurp others, eventually that comes back around and boomerangs back around on you. So if you utilize your enthusiasm to create mutually flourishing relationships, there will be no need for someone to take you down, because you haven't taken anything from them with your victory. You both win, right? So there won't be a need to create a winner and a loser. You just have a win-win situation. So this is something we'll talk about with this full moon, is creating win-win situations. So how do you do that? Well, through empathy, through considering the needs of the person that you're working with rather than just trying to dominate them. Other questions. Is this relationship permanent or a torrid affair? Sometimes we get attracted to things that are very temporary, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't pursue them. It just means that we need to be cautious about how much energy and resources and time and effort we commit to that, and how much we try to hang on to it. That's the other thing. Sometimes we can have passions and desires that flare up, and we try to build an entire life around that. And then eventually our passions and desires change, and then we're left kind of disorientated. So if you understand the temporal nature of this energy, you won't necessarily build your entire life around it, and that can lead you to better outcomes. Then finally, how can you gather strength for the long road ahead? This decan, if we were speaking in terms of the Lord of the Rings, which I like to do quite a bit now, this decan very much represents Rivendell to me. And Rivendell was a place that was sort of the last, they would call it the last homely home. When the travelers were moving from the west to the east, it was the last homely home in the west, basically, before the territory got more difficult. And it was a place it was an oasis. It was a place to rest. It was a place to heal. It's a place where Frodo was healing after he experienced one of the first challenges in the Lord of the Rings. And, you know, that scene in the Fellowship, I believe it's the Fellowship of the Ring, where Frodo had been stabbed with the Morgul blade on Weathertop, and he's convalescing in Rivendell, I think very much represents this full moon, especially because you'll see the card associated with Libra III is the Four of Swords, where you see someone laying down in a bed, convalescing, resting, meditating, etc. So it's an interesting combination of images there. But how can we look out ahead and see how far we actually do have to go while enjoying the process of unfolding? Honey says, honey also attracts ants and wasps. Just saying. Well, of course, but we can all twist each other's metaphors just to serve our own narratives, Adi, if you want to. But yes, the point definitely remains. Sometimes when we are kind and nice, we can attract people that will take advantage of us, and we have to be aware of that too. Sometimes the sensitive of us have very idealistic visions of how people should treat one another. And not everybody does function in good faith with one another, and that can disrupt an entire system of exchange. So yeah, I think that it's important to recognize that part of it as well. Okay, so that's the Sun in Aries 3. So just going back to the chart, you can see here, let's see if we can get this to share again. There we go. So you could see here Sun in Aries 3, also Chiron in Aries 3 in this chart. So we may feel nervous about trying to win someone over through humor, through kindness, through charisma. We may feel like we are, I don't know. Oftentimes Chiron shows us something that we need to do, but we fear to do it because we feel like it's something where we haven't been successful in the past, and we have a trauma associated with it. So maybe there's a situation where you need to advocate for yourself or for your own needs or for your point of view, but it may feel scary because you may have failed to convince someone with your humor, with your charisma, with your grace. Now, there's always an opportunity to try again and to heal that wound, and that might be part of this as well. So if we look at the next part, let's talk about the host of the sun, and let's talk about the host Mars in Cancer 3. So this is Mars in its fall, in the third decan, squaring this lunation. Here we see a figure that is refusing the fourth cup from the hand of the divine after already attaining 3 cups. This decan is called the Lord of Luxury or the Lord of Blended Pleasure in Book Thoth and Book of Tea. Austin Coppock calls it the overflowing cup. So we have an overabundance of something. And we have also have an awareness due to this relationship with Hecate, right? That's the spirit with this decan, that abundance sometimes leads to scarcity. Hoarding abundance sometimes leads to scarcity for someone else. This decan often shows us that we can have a hyper awareness of haves and have-nots. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but I can attest from personal experience, having Mercury in this decan retrograde in the 12th, ruling my second house, that sometimes it feels like if I am going to benefit, someone else has to suffer. And that awareness has led me sometimes to not want to participate in competitive situations, especially financially. So being aware that we may be witnessing people taking more with Mars, like creating conflict, taking more than their fair share and creating scarcity for others, which we have seen this playing out. We have seen a massive wealth consolidation with corporate oligarchy in the past few years, decades, etc., that is becoming more and more prevalent in our society now that the corporate oligarchy basically attained political power. I mean, they always had political power, but attained it more blatantly, right? Not through back channels necessarily, but just like now they're blatantly running the show. And that's something that is concerning for a lot of people right now, because when you have a corporate oligarchy running a country, they will prioritize profit over people. And we're seeing this play out right now. We're seeing this play out with trade wars. We're seeing this play out with threats and like a movement towards radical individualism, isolationism. I don't know. A lot of it, I'm just trying to parse out the last few months in my brain and contextualize it. It can feel very overwhelming sometimes. But this Mars in this decan, surplus versus scarcity, feelings of divine discontent. We may be feeling a little bit of apathy, jadedness, or even some boredom. We may be feeling frustrated because of the situation. We may be feeling like, man, we're got a David versus Goliath kind of situation. That can lead to feelings of, well, what's the point, right? And that may be feeding into our collective feelings at this full moon. It also can speak towards luxurious tastes and being overfilled. If you think about the final decan of Cancer, Cancer being a moon-ruled sign talks a lot about satiating our bodily, physical security desires. Well, what happens when we've had enough to eat? What happens when we have enough shelter, property, etc.? What do we do with the excess, right? Do we continue to hoard it so that we create the illusion of scarcity or create actual scarcity for other people? Or do we share the excess so that we can continue in a mutual flourishing and continue to be good stewards of this beautiful land that provides that abundance? These are the questions we're asking with Mars here. Mars in this decking can also speak to the point of diminishing returns. With Mars going back in bounds, I mean, we obviously are seeing the point of diminishing returns with all of the cutting that's happening to essential government programs. Yes, you could make an argument that there is always going to be some inefficiency and bloat within very large governments. But indiscriminate cutting can lead to cutting things that were actually necessary for functioning. And we may be coming to the point where, all the cutting that's happening is just kind of random and not necessarily in service of what is being proposed. So questions you could ask yourself about Mars, the host of the sun, providing resources for the sun. We may be trying to convince other people towards issues of scarcity, surplus, etc., towards sharing their excess and their wealth. So where in your life are you feeling discontented? Do you need more or do you have enough? That is a good question to ask yourself whenever any planet is transiting through this decan. How much is enough? And how do we have gratitude for what we have? I think that this is there is a very simple solution to a lot of feelings of lack. And that is one of gratitude. That there is a cultural drive towards accumulation in Western capitalism. And one thing that I'm seeing a focal point on in indigenous cultures through my exposure to them in Robin Wall Kimmerer's work, and also through Tyson Yunkaporta's work in a book called Sand Talk, is wealth was not about accumulation in those cultures. Wealth was about sharing. The wealthiest were the ones that could share the most with their community. That's how you displayed your wealth, by giving it away, by sharing it with others. So that to me is a really important lesson for Mars here in this decan, is you can feel wealthy by sharing something with someone, even if the gift that you have is humble. Those actions multiply. I had a friend, the way that I share things recently now is, first of all, I love sharing information. So whenever I receive like a book or something like that, or the resources to learn something new, I want to share it with people. I don't want to hoard my knowledge. I want to share it. I basically show up here on this podcast every week with a very minimal amount of gatekeeping, and share my wisdom for an extended period of time. And to me, that is a giveaway. That is my version of that potlatch that they call it. The other thing I like to do with some of my friends is I like to send people books. I really enjoy, if someone expresses wanting to learn something new, I will send them a book, and I love it when I receive books. I mean, that is my love language. Books are my love language. And I had a friend who was talking about wanting to eliminate sugar from his diet. He was really, he's been experiencing some health challenges, and he wanted to kind of go on an elimination diet, basically. And I was thinking about, and your mileage may vary with this, okay? I know everyone's got their favorite pet diets, but I've had some success with the Whole30 diet, which is sort of a take some things out and then add things back in type of diet. And I sent him this book like that describes this system. And I got a phone call from him saying how he just really appreciated the book. Like he's one of my Aries friends. So he was very enthusiastic about it. And I'll tell you, it felt so good to like see someone benefiting from knowledge, from receiving a gift. Like the giving made me feel, amazing. To somebody who shares wisdom and knowledge, often sometimes people don't receive it until very much later in the process. To get feedback on like appreciating and hearing you when you're trying to help, man, I'll tell you, there's something just amazing in that. So that can be that humility, that humble gift that you can give to someone. You never know how you're going to completely change their life or how you can create these reciprocal mutual flourishings. The selfish part of that gift to me was, I want to be able to call my friend well into our old age. I want him to live a long time. I don't want him to die young. I don't want him to suffer from the same cancer that his father did. His father had a pancreatic cancer. And if I get the gift of more time because I shared a gift of knowledge, look at the reciprocal relationship that creates. These are the types of questions that we can ask ourselves with Mars in this decan, or any planet here, is how do you start creating and sharing your surplus, whether it's knowledge, whether it's time, whether it's resources, right? So that you create that mutual flourishing. All right. So I'm going to check in with the chat here. Chad is here. What's up, Chad? Says the canopy in this card, I believe, is a chuppah, which is a structure used at Jewish weddings, which is supposed to symbolize a stable home. Yes, exactly. I think you are correct on that, Chad. So a celebration, right? A celebration of an oasis, it's a really nice card. And it's a nice oasis in what sometimes can be a challenging sign in Aries, right? It's a challenging territory where we have to put out a lot of yang energy. Sometimes it can be a place of conflict. But when things are moving through the third decan, because of the Venus influence, it could be a temporary resting place from that conflict. Ani says, hard check from Mars might be metaphorical ants. Mars in Cancer is a poor sport. Yeah, I think so too sometimes. Yeah, and but here's the thing. Ants play their role. Ants move things from one place to another. Ants aerate the soil. They have their role in the ecosystem. They may not have their role in our kitchens, but it's all about context, right? Ani says, I'd like to think Mars would want to wreck the Four of Wands scene with a party gone too far, then leave the place trashed after it's consumed everything. Yeah, that could be. So that's a good point, Ani. I think Mars is asking us in this full moon. I think that's a really great metaphor. I think Mars is asking us, how much is enough? How much, initiation is enough? How much, I'm asking myself this as we ordered hundreds of seeds. We were just like, yeah, let's grow cucumbers. Let's grow tomatoes. Let's grow carrots. Oh, let's do 4 variety of carrots. Let's do these native plants. Let's rip out every inch of turf in our yard. Let's do 2 raised beds. No, 4. That was kind of the energy with the Pisces part of it. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what limitations am I working within? Where is the point of diminishing returns? Where the limitation that we have is time. So we have multiple projects going on. So how do we invest the amount of time to create a bountiful harvest while still maintaining our full-time jobs, doing our astrology, doing our, she's a farmer's market manager at a local township. So she has a 40-hour-a-week job that she does. And how do we incorporate all of these things in while we're still creating abundance and having that party, right? A garden party. So yes, asking yourself how much is necessary and where is enough? We have real trouble with that in America in particular, is saying that I've had enough. The one thing I loved about the Serviceberry, I'm going to keep referencing this book today. I just read most of it. I'm almost done with it now. Someone was asking an indigenous person, they were doing some research and they were talking about they had made a hunting kill and brought the meat back to the community. And someone was asking, well, how do you store this meat? You know, how do you smoke it or preserve it, etc.? And they were like, I store it in the neighbors of my, I store it in the belly of my neighbors, store it in my brother. You know, what do you mean? How do I store it? Because that concept was so foreign to them, right? They brought the animal back because it was a gift from the community, and they shared that with their community, and with kind of the unspoken understanding that when the fisherman has a bountiful catch, that they will be shared with. There are these reciprocal relationships, and that concept is so foreign to us in Western civilization. We think that we always have to. It's not even enough to have quote unquote enough. It's like, well, we have to have enough, and then like stores and stores and stores, right? Of extra. And this sickness is, well, first of all, they talk about the Wendigo sickness, which is in Native American or indigenous cultures, they talk about the Wendigo as it's a warning to not take more than you need, because that can lead to scarcity for the entire community. And we have that Wendigo mindset being grossly on display by the billionaire class in Western civilization right now, where they have such a mental illness when it comes to not knowing when enough is enough, that they are willing to create mass suffering for others to take way more than they could utilize in 100, 1,000, 10,000 lifetimes. And that's something that we have to kind of look ourselves in the mirror and say, how did we buy into this narrative, and how do we perpetuate it? And how are we going to start telling a different story where we don't venerate the people that have quote unquote won capitalism? Because I think that we still do that. I think in Western civilization, we still have this mindset of, it could be me. I could hit it. I could strike it rich. If only I did this, this, and this, I could be living the 100-foot yacht lifestyle. And it's empty at a certain point, and it creates suffering. So interesting questions to ask with this. Susanna is here. Moi, Susanna. Moi to my Finnish friends. I hope that you're doing well here today. There was a mention of Scandinavian countries in the Serviceberry. I highly recommend this book, Susanna. But they talk about the more, they called it comfy capitalism for Scandinavian countries, which I thought was interesting. And you know, your mileage may vary. You live there, so you have a firsthand experience of what this is like. But the basic argument was potentially higher taxation, but better services in those types of countries. So you'll have to give us some feedback on how that's working out, because that concept in America is something that many Americans are like rail against. That their attitude is, what is mine, and everyone else can go to hell type of thing. And again, that's what's gotten us into this scarcity mindset that we have here. You know, it's funny. I wonder. I'm curious. I'm curious as to what decan the United States has their sun. I'm just going to look up the Sibley chart here for a second. I wonder if they have anything in Cancer 3. I have a feeling that their sun is in the second decan of Cancer, but I will look. So this is the Sibley. Let's see. I'm going to put that in the second chart here. And I will show you on the screen here so that I'm not just howling into the void. One moment. So there's the full moon in Libra on the inside, and the Sibley chart. This is funny. All right. So if we just look at the Sibley chart of the United States, you can see here that we have Mercury retrograde in Cancer 3. Okay. And I know this placement. This is my natal placement. Mine is at 22 retrograde in Cancer. And I'd have to reflect on my own experience with this. I will say this, like, The American mindset, there is one of a fear of not having enough, a fear of lack, this glamorization of luxury and things of that nature. Now, my experience of this growing up was one where I experienced both scarcity and abundance. Sometimes in the same weekend. like I grew up with a single dad for much of my youth, but I had grandparents like that were kind of they were some of them were very wealthy, and sometimes I would go visit my mom, and then I would be exposed to this luxurious kind of almost hoardy like lifestyle, and then I'd come back to my dad's, and then we'd be like, figuring out how to make Hamburger Helper go for stretch for a couple extra days. So it was a very strange dichotomy to grow up with, and sometimes you would receive something very nice from one of the family members, and then you were made to feel really guilty about it from the more humble side of the family. So it's a real push and a pull as far as like feelings of worthiness. And maybe America is going through this as well, the feelings of worthiness of having versus not. And I guess what I will say is I also witnessed the challenges of my wealthy side of the family. They were very unhappy. And they did a lot of horrible things to each other to feed a beast that could never be satisfied. And we see this playing out in American culture and history right now too. Is we have some mouths that are never going to be satisfied, like in the billionaire class, because it's not about having enough; it's about winning. It's about a disease that is very difficult to heal. And I'm not sure exactly what we do about it. I'm open to groupthink on that. We'll have to live into the answer. So that's a long-winded explanation of Mars's role within this. I hope it gives you some things to reflect upon in your own journey on witnessing what we're seeing out in the collective. So let's move forward now to the moon. And Ani's like, how many plants can we cram in our yard? Yes, that was very much the experience that we were having. I think it was just enthusiasm that we got carried away with. It felt very Jupiter and Gemini. It felt like, ooh, that would be fun. Ooh, that would be super fun. Like, and our rationalization was, since we're starting most of it, probably 95% of it from seed, that, oh, we'll just get all these seeds, because a packet of seeds is like $3. That packet of seeds contains sometimes 50 to 100 seeds. So for $3, you can get 100 plants. When you buy them as starts, sometimes you're paying $10 to $15 for a potted plant, for one plant. So, in our minds, we're like, let's get all the seeds. But you have to set limits for things too. And you only have so much space. You only have so much time. And asking the question of when enough is important. One thing you'll learn as a gardener is sometimes more is not a way to create abundance. When you cram a raised bed or a garden space too full of plants, each of those individual plants do not have enough space, enough resources, enough light, enough air circulation to produce at their highest capacity. So what you will learn is, as you become a more experienced gardener, is sometimes you plant less plants, and that will actually create more yield, right? Less is more. You plant 3 tomato plants that are evenly spaced apart instead of 10 in that same space, you'll actually get more tomatoes than you would if you just crammed 10 plants together in this tiny space. I think that there's some existential wisdom within that too. Is sometimes when we put our attention towards a few things, rather than just trying to cram too many things into a limited space, we actually will have a greater opportunity to flourish and a greater opportunity for abundance. So yes, it's a good reminder, Ani. All right, so we're going over and we're going to talk a little bit about the moon now. So this is the moon in Libra conjunct Spica. So if you notice, let's just go back to one chart. We were kind of just, I was checking my work against the American mindset with this abundance mindset. It's really interesting. America is a complicated place, complicated fellow, you could say, like Mark Murphy from the Green Bay Packers called Aaron Rodgers at one point. He's like, this is a complicated fellow. But I digress, for those of you who aren't football fans. So here is the moon in Libra 3, conjoining the fixed star Spica at 23 degrees. And this decan, let's bring up, first of all, see the relationship between the moon in Libra and the providing that Venus is doing for the moon. It's in aversion, okay, to the moon. Venus is in aversion to the moon. It's stationing direct, and it's conjoining Saturn. So we may have to set some limits with our dreams, I think, is what this really is teaching me here. But let's talk about Libra 3, because this is a nice counterbalance to both of the energies that we just discussed. The energy of wanting to convince others to our vision, of having a respite from conflict maybe, but still really trying to, motivate people to see things our way. Needing to do that because of fear of scarcity, a fear of not having enough potentially, or when we have an abundance of something, what do we do with that? Are we going to just hoard it and let it go to waste? Sometimes you would not believe the amount of food that goes to waste in this country. This is the real problem that we have with scarcity consciousness in the world, is we have plenty of food to feed the world all the time, but it's access that we are in dearth of, right? We don't have open access to evenly distribute this to people that need it. So Libra 3 comes along and says, here's how we rebalance some of these things. Now you can see in Libra 3, we have the Four of Swords, and we have a figure that is resting. So we have two decans that seemingly are some kind of association with rest, which I think is interesting. This decan is called Rest from Strife, okay? The Lord of Truce. Austin Coppock calls it a gyroscope, where we're trying to balance out many different things at once. We're trying to keep a number of plates spinning. Now, the daimon or spirit associated with this decan is very, very interesting to me. It is the goddess Nemesis. And Nemesis has a slightly different connotation in ancient Greek philosophy than we have in a modern context. And Nemesis is sort of like, oh, it's our arch enemy. And that's not necessarily how I would interpret it from an ancient Greek perspective. The goddess Nemesis was someone who helped to restore right proportion to the random distributions of the goddess Tuke, which also translates to fortune or chance. So Nemesis kind of is a planet related to Saturn. And it says, how can we rebalance something that has gotten out of whack? How do we increase that which is lacking, decreasing that which is excessive? Sound like something that could be a nice antidote to the Mars questions that we were asking. It also can show us the results of our action. Nemesis brings you your due. So it's sort of a goddess or an ideal of consequences as well. So we could see at this full moon, receiving our due. And we might receive something nice because the moon is on Spica. If we haven't been doing our work properly, or if we've been cutting corners, we might receive the results of those actions. And that may necessitate us changing and increasing something which was lacking. Maybe it's discipline, or decreasing that which is excessive. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's scarcity mindset. Maybe it's hoarding. If we're hoarding something, maybe the rebalancing is starting to share once again. So yeah, and Aaron says, yes, the gyroscope. I keep my natal Mars here. And I had to look up what a gyroscope was when I was learning about the deck. And once I figured it out, I had to buy myself one. They're pretty neat. They are neat. There are lots of different balancing forces trying to kind of stay afloat, you know. I have the part of spirit in this decan, and the ancient astrologers, or at least how Robert Schmidt interpreted them, would say that the part of spirit is sort of how you react when you meet your fate. And you can see in this chart, the part of spirit is conjoining the sun. This is what the part of spirit looks like in a astrogold chart. And what I have found with having this placement is I will often find myself in situations of chaos, situations that are not perfect, situations that require me to become the force of rebalance, to become centered internally will create better circumstances externally. Oftentimes what Libra III people, Mars, Moon, Sun, etc., will try to do early in their life is find the perfect externalized situation. They're like, well, this isn't fair. This situation isn't balanced. This household isn't peaceful, etc. When they truly start to thrive is when they realize that once they themselves become balanced, become centered, their presence helps to restore the balance that they are seeking in an external environment. So this moon, this full moon, could teach us that through our own centeredness, through our own ability to create equilibrium internally, that could lead to better external outcomes. We could be the ones that restore the peace to the situation that feels chaotic. And I will say this, I know a lot of people are feeling a lot of anxiety right now, and understandably so. There's a lot of changes and challenges, and we're witnessing some very difficult experiences. But how do you stay centered during that moment so that you can be the force of change and the force of rebalancing, rather than expecting your environment to provide that for you? Because if you are, here's what I'll say, friends, if you are expecting like whatever government leader you want to insert, whether it's the American government, the European government, wherever you're listening from, if you're leader of choice, if you're expecting them to provide you with peace of mind, oh my goodness, friends. I mean, that is a recipe for constant anxiety, especially with the type of leadership that we have displayed right now. That is, it changes from not just from 1 week to the next, but from 1 hour to the next. And for me, I'm not getting on that roller coaster. I went through that. I went through that from 2016 to 2020. And I would get high or low with whatever came out of the leadership's mouth. But what I was doing is I was riding the external part of the wheel of fortune. And what Libra III teaches us is to connect to the hub of the wheel. When you connect to the hub of the wheel, you find that centered place within you that is unassailable by the twists and turns of fortune, of 2K, of the news. You become the eye of the storm, the eye of the hurricane. You become that peaceful center while things are raging around you. Now, does that mean that you ignore people in need or ignore a call to action? No, absolutely not. But what it does mean is that when you are called to action and when you are needed, you are going to be able to react in a way that is balanced and centered and with clarity, rather than in a way that is ineffective because you are just too anxious or too flustered to know how to respond. So themes with Libra III, the eye of the storm, making adjustments to maintain your equilibrium. Sometimes your inner equilibrium, sometimes your outer one. Connecting with the hub of the wheel. Actions that stabilize the randomness of fortune. It may feel like we just don't know what's coming next, but the way that I'm creating that stability is I'm putting my hands in the dirt. I'm saying, Mother Earth, sustain me, stabilize me. From my connection with you, I will be able to center myself through taking positive action towards my own and the flourishing of others. I'm taking back agency. I'm taking back a feeling of control. I'm taking back a feeling of peace through centeredness. Okay? Receiving your due, mental discipline, poise is a great word for this deck. And how can we be poised? Poise is very attractive. People want to work with people who are poised. Working with someone who's flitting about one way or the other that can confuse the people that you want to work with. So questions you can ask yourself: what adjustments are necessary to maintain harmony? You may have a vision about how things are going, but you may have to make some compromises. You may have to make some adjustments to the vision that you started at the new moon in Aries, and that's okay. That's normal. Doesn't mean you're failing. Compromise is not failure. Compromise is sometimes a show of strength. How can you find your center within an ever-changing cosmos? What excesses need consolidation? What lack needs increase? What gifts and challenges are your due? What are the results of your action thus far? And if you're not happy with the results of your action, how do you make changes? Where is your mental discipline required? And then finally, how can you bring your internal peace into the external environment? Really important questions to ask with this full moon. Aaron says, to be honest, I'm expecting to get laid off under this full moon, but perhaps I'm wrong, or perhaps I'm not, and it will be a gift in hindsight. Either way, I'm clinging to acceptance. I think that's a really healthy mindset, Aaron. And, Aaron's one of our federal workers right now who's really under fire by the current administration. And I'm sure that, especially since you are basically on the front lines of the changes that are happening, that it's very anxiety producing. And it's okay to acknowledge that is very stressful, Aaron. I know if I were in your shoes, I would be feeling some stress, and there's other things that I have stress about. There's other issues that are very important to me, that each of us has a connection to things that really kind of animate either our anxiety or our care about things, like, and I think that in this current circumstance, being able to, I wouldn't say isolate, but I would say to pick out something that is most important to you, that is through your own area of expertise, and work on creating equilibrium and balance and justice in that small area, can be a way to restore sanity. For my efforts, it's through working with, not only through doing this work that I'm doing here, through trying to maintain some kind of center and peace of mind, not only for myself, but for my community, by modeling that. But also through, I care very much about nature, and I care very much about the plants and animals in my ecosystems. And by creating change in that regard, that is one thing that I can advocate for as well. I can be an example of how to change over like turf yard that sucks up resources like water and chemicals and things like that, and to restore habitat for pollinators like bees and butterflies, birds, etc. That's something I can plant my flag in, right? And for you, Aaron, it might be something different. And I think having faith in whatever your journey is important. And I think that you're doing that here by clinging to acceptance, right? By saying that, well, maybe there is something where this will lead to a new awareness. It will lead to a new experience. I'm also I've been really trying lately to not get upset about something before it happens. I think there's a really fine line and a balance to be struck between preparing for a future that is negative, or trying to protect ourselves against negativity, and then living our lives, right? And that's a hard balance. I'm not always successful in that, but I think you have the right mindset with it. Yeah, definitely sending you luck and abundance, Aaron. Aaron says, Cancer is my 10th house and Pisces my 6th. This definitely is one of the most trying and anxiety-filled times of my life. Yeah. Sorry to hear that, bud. I think that it is for a lot of people. I think that there's a lot of suffering that the actions of the United States government has been creating, not only in America, but worldwide right now. And trying to alleviate that one small step at a time is, I think, good practice. Rachel says, also loved your recent nightlight talk. I started to work with decennials, helping me with zodiacal releasing. Oh, good. Yeah, we got to support Erin with her astrological work. Yes, that's awesome, Rachel. So happy to hear it. I'm maybe throwing myself in astrology practice full time soon. Who knows? Well, there you go, Erin. Maybe this is the impetus to move you forward into a new career, right? I will tell you, when COVID hit, I was a professional musician who was teaching at a community college, teaching songwriting and guitar classes, and doing little gigs here and there. Those gigs were taken away by COVID, and they weren't available anymore. And I kind of saw that writing on the wall, and I had to pivot. And I had always been interested in astrology. I had started working with Nightlight and learning through that. And that seemingly negative experience at the time led to everything that you're seeing here, this channel, my full-time astrology practice. So sometimes what seems to be a negative experience can lead you to a different purpose. That doesn't mean that I don't miss some of my music career stuff sometimes, and it doesn't mean that I'm not a musician. It just means that sometimes our roles become different out in the world. Aaron says, yep, I just have to trust the universe. I'm doing my best to stay strong and have faith. We'll get through this together. Exactly. And that's really one of the points of this book, is by supporting each other rather than competing with each other, we will get through things more intact. So good luck with that. And yeah, keep doing your astrology, keep having faith in that universe to provide, and figure out what grounds you, what centers you. And you never know who you're helping with the work that you're doing. And here's the other thing I'll offer, Aaron. The essence of what you are doing in that government work sometimes will take a different form. The essence of the work that I was doing as a community college songwriting instructor, as an adult education guitar instructor, the essence of that is still running through the work that I'm doing here today. Many of the talks that I gave as a songwriter instructor were very similar to the ones that I'm giving on this channel. I just there was a different vehicle. There was a different form. So the essence of you is still going to be permeating through whatever form that it takes externally. So keep that in mind. And I think that faith in that idea can get you through some difficult times. Yeah, appreciate it. Okay. So that's our moon in Libra 3. And Spica, let's go over to Spica, because we've talked about Nemesis here. So here it says, Nemesis was the goddess of indignation against and retribution for evil deeds and undeserved good fortune. She was a personification of resentment aroused in men by those who committed crimes with apparent impunity or with had inordinate good fortune. Nemesis directed human affairs in such a way to maintain equilibrium. Her name means she who distributes or deals out. Happiness and unhappiness were measured out by her, care being taken that happiness was not too frequent or too excessive. If this happened, Nemesis could bring about losses and suffering. As one who checked extravagant favors by 2K, Nemesis was regarded as an avenging or punishing divinity. So just checking the balances and checks and balances, right? So maybe we see, if we are seeing something that we deem as undeserved good fortune, or we see something as somebody taking more than they're due, maybe this moon starts to balance that out once again. So that could be something to have faith within as well. And then Spica here, you could see, here is the constellation Spica, or the constellation Virgo, excuse me, and the fixed star Spica, that is right where the goddess, this would be, I guess, Demeter, was holding this sheaf of grain or wheat, okay? And this is a fixed star. Again, we talked about the Stella Maris, the star of the sea that guided sailors towards their destinations. Protection against waves of desire. Maybe protection against the waves of excessive desire that Mars and Cancer 3 might be bringing us. It also represents a bountiful harvest, a special gift or talent, a cornucopia, if you will, of skills. It's also useful for attracting helpful patrons. So maybe there's something where you can receive help at this full moon because of the Spica's influence as well. All right. Aaron says, right, I'm a helper, and my calling is to serve, but there are many ways to do it. Absolutely. And you'll find your way. Just keep living into the answer. All right, friends. So I'm going to take a little stretch here, and I encourage you to do the same. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Venus. So we'll take a stretch break, and we'll take this off the screen, come back here. So do me a favor during our little stretch break. Please like and subscribe. This is a great way to support the channel. If you hit that like button, it helps get our message out to more people. It helps distribute the seeds of whatever wisdom we're co-creating here today. Much like a cedar waxwing distributes the seeds of the service berry by eating and then, just pooping it out. Hopefully your hitting the like button isn't just like a, like a waxwing taking a dump, but but you could think of it that way if that is funny to you. But see, this is the thing. That act actually does help us, or to proliferate the service berry species. So hit that like button. So that's a funny, long-winded way of saying please like and subscribe. Support the channel. If you want to make a donation via Buy Me a Coffee or through Super Chat, that's always appreciated as well. But the easiest thing to do is to like the video and subscribe and share it with your friends. Spread the word. It's always nice to hear that someone was like, oh, I heard about this from a friend, and now I'm here, and now I'm contributing to the community. So yeah, Rachel thinks that's funny. Yeah, it is funny. Poop is funny. I think that in many circumstances, poop jokes are, for a Taurus moon such as myself, I find humor in that. Maybe Rachel, as a Taurus sun, has a little soft spot for potty humor. But I digress. So now that we've gotten a little drink of water, let's go back to the chart. And we've got a few more pieces to describe here. Thank you so much for hanging with me today. Appreciate it. I missed you all last week. We got a lot of projects done, and it was a nice little break, but it wasn't really a vacation. It was one of those work staycations where you took time off to do a bunch of projects that have been stacking up in your house, kind of thing. But you need that every once in a while, and I'm grateful for that time. All right, so let's talk about Venus. And here is Venus in Pisces. So here's our host Venus right here. And it is stacking up in this Pisces stellium, conjoining Saturn, the North Node, and Mercury. So let's take a look at the decans of Pisces and just talk about this real quick. So you could see here Pisces 3 is syncretized with the 10 of Cups. And here we see a vision of a happy family, underneath a rainbow, dancing and glorifying, exalting the rainbow. tasting the rainbow, if you will. Wasn't that like a Skittles commercial or something? Um, but this is a decan that is Mars ruled. So interesting that such a vision of like idealism has Mars as a ruler. So there is some secret significations just having Mars as the rulers. What are you willing to sacrifice for the vision? What are you willing to give up? Are you willing to fight for it? Are you willing to go to battle over your vision? Do you need to put in some sweat equity to achieve the vision? Austin Coppock calls it a cup of blood. I mean, sometimes you have to give something to receive something. Like when you're creating a garden, you give your time, you give your labor. Sometimes you do give sweat and blood to it. I've cut myself plenty of times working in my garden and given sort of my energy towards it. So Venus is going to be hosting the moon. It is an inversion, which means that there's a difficult, maybe even back channel line of communication between the two planets. And it is stationing direct. So that is a really important omen in and of itself. That's called a moment of phasis. So a lot of things that we might have been waiting for might start moving forward, especially good fortune potentially. So idealistic crusades is a Pisces 3 signification. Sacrificing everything for your vision. The manifestation of a dream. Pursuit of closure, the end of a rainbow, right? Religious zealotry and fanaticism. That's some of the negative sides of this decan is we can get so wrapped up in our beliefs that we're creating suffering for others in pursuit of them. So be careful of that. So questions to ask yourself about Venus as host in this full moon. Is this deal worth sacrificing for? Or is this ideal? Excuse me. I guess is this deal might be appropriate too, because we have a we have a leader who has fashioned himself as a deal maker. And there's all these exchanges. I've had some Gemini folks in my life in the past, and they love making deals. We talk a lot about a lot of the conversations I have with my Gemini friends is like how to make a deal. But where are we sacrificing, for the deal, for winning the deal? What actually creates success when that comes about? And oftentimes when you're trying to quote unquote make a deal, you don't win a deal by strong-arming the other person into doing what you want them to do. You create a deal by compromising, by negotiating and discussing, giving something and then receiving something. Those are the art. That's the art of a healthy deal, right? So something to consider with that as well. How far are you willing to go to succeed? I've been asking myself that question lately about my garden. How much investment and time and energy and sweat and whatever is resources am I going to invest into that? I really believe in it though, so I think probably quite a bit, but we just have to work with the time that we have, and we have to pace ourselves. Which role are you playing, martyr or savior? That's always an important question to ask yourself when we have planets in Pisces 3. Sometimes we think we are sacrificing for this greater good when we're really just like creating suffering for ourselves. And so that's a good question to ask with this. Can you temper your wild swings of emotion? I think that this is a nice relationship between the moon in Libra 3 and Venus in Pisces 3. This Pisces 3 decan can bring us the heights of ecstasy and the depths of despair. And the Libra moon is really trying to create equilibrium, balance, decrease that which is excessive, even if what is excessive is too much emotion, too much fear, even too much joy, right? There's a point of diminishing returns that Mars talks about pursuing too much physical pleasure. Is this the happy ending or the tragic conclusion? I do think that there will be some types of endings or conclusions, especially with Venus conjoining Saturn. This decan often is associated with endings in and of itself, but with a planet conjoining Saturn, maybe we'll see the results. This full moon has a real getting your due type of energy to it through Nemesis, through Venus stationing direct conjoining Saturn. There's a lot of multiple significations in regards to like finishing something. And finally, how can you maintain hope in the face of change? I think this is really important. There's a spirit in this decking called Elpis, and Elpis is basically the translation of hope that was stuck in the bottom of the lid of the jar of Pandora. And all of the ills of society were being released from that Pandora's jar. And it's a jar, not a box, actually. And Elpis was what was kind of snuck in there by Prometheus or whoever filled that jar to help humanity maintain some hope within some of those challenging situations. So how do we maintain our hope when things look bleak? And that's really the essence of faith. I think that's how we deal with faith in a healthy way. Sometimes we have to believe in something that we can't necessarily see just yet. When I'm reading a book like The Serviceberry, there is a very idealistic vision of a market economy versus of a gift economy versus a market economy. Excuse me. And right now, it's hard to see that. We see smaller examples of it. We see examples in nature. We see examples in small communities, but we're not seeing it on a larger scale quite yet. But we have to have faith in the process and utilize our visionary qualities to start taking small steps and actions towards that vision. And that faith can really move mountains. You have to be able to have a vision and have faith in a successful outcome to keep moving towards it. If you give up because you're not feeling good about what's going on in the world, there's no way to fix it, or there's no way to change an outcome necessarily. Sometimes outcomes change on their own without our intervention, but oftentimes if we have a vision and a dream, the hope that we have, the faith in a better world, that's what's motivating us to keep going and to make the changes we need to make. So that's Venus hanging out there, another part of this equation, and I think one worthy of a little bit of discussion. So the first aspect that this full moon is going to make, I'll go back to recently used here. Let's move this forward a couple days here to the 15th. Oops. So you can see here that the first aspect that this full moon is going to make after it's released from the bond, what's released from being within 15 degrees of either side of the opposition to the sun, which is a traditional indicator of how something might start to manifest from a lunation, is we see a trine to Venus. So if I go back a couple hours here, we're going to see the first aspect right here, trine to Venus. Now, I'm not necessarily counting the opposition to Uranus here because Uranus is a modern planet, and this technique is a traditional technique. It wouldn't matter anyway. The first aspect is still trine to Venus. I mean, that gives me some hope for this lunation as well, is that yes, after the full moon, we may be feeling tired. We may not be feeling the best physically because the moon is going to be in her exile in Scorpio. But if we connect with that hope, if we connect with that vision, I think that can sustain us and drive us forward into positive outcomes moving forward. Sun Dancer is here. Sun Dancer says, "Hi, Spencer. I know a very wealthy man that has a black moon Lilith in Cancer 3. He gives much out of obligation to very parasitic people in his life. I can't stand to watch. His sun is Pisces 3. Ooh, that is interesting. It's a juicy detail, Sun Dancer, and welcome. Yeah, like I think that sometimes when we have placements in Cancer 3, we can give too much, right? Sometimes we hoard. I've done both in my life. I sometimes am an overgiver of my time, resources, etc. There's times where I've hoarded some things. I've been working on the right balance with that, and with the person that you're talking about, the self-sacrificing, the martyrdom of Sun and Pisces sounds very much like some of the themes that we were talking about, and having the combination of those two things, it really seems like it's playing out in his experience. All right, let's see. What else? Did I miss any other ones here? Okay. So As this full moon is unfolding, we are going to see a couple of things. So I'll just take you through the next kind of week or so of the unfolding of this, and then we'll wrap up for the day with an animal and an I-Ching. And then I will go get some dinner. So we have Mercury moving into Aries and conjoining Neptune from the 16th to the 17th as this unfolds. I think that this is going to be a mixed bag. I think it's going to be beneficial because Mercury is going to improve its dignity. It's going to be out of its dual debility, its exile and fall in Pisces, excuse me. But it's going to enter Aries and immediately be hosted by a fallen Mars, and it's going to conjoin Neptune, a planet that I consider somewhat of a malefic influence. What I would say about Mercury moving into Aries conjoining Neptune is don't fall victim to the illusion of individualism, I guess I would say. I'm going to do an entire live stream on Neptune and Aries probably next week. But I've been speaking in little bits and pieces about it, and I think that sometimes Neptune can represent the mass delusion that we have, that we exalt something in the beginning of its cycle, and then eventually that essence is shown to be illusionary. We try to find transcendence through that energy. And what we see and what we're going to see with Neptune and Aries, in my opinion, is a glamorization and a glorification of conflict, of individualism, of neo-colonialism, I guess you could say also, especially because of the Two of Wands influence, where we see Alexander the Great in the card that's called the Lord of Dominion, that is associated with leaders that have tried to expand their empires. And Mercury is going to activate that. So we may have a lot of thoughts towards independence. May have a lot of thoughts towards, I just want to strike out on my own. But just be careful when Mercury conjoins Neptune, that you're not falling under a spell, I guess you could say. Neptune always reminds me of a spell. Sometimes that spell is positive to move us forward, but oftentimes it leads us astray. So I guess just be careful not to fall too heavily under the spell of Neptune as Mercury conjoins. Let's see. Sun Dancer says, what you think? Last time I spoke with him, he was losing a lot of money, and I thought it might be a blessing to get him out from under all of that feeling of obligation and playing God with his money. Sun Dancer, I think that everyone has their own journey. And I think that it's hard for me to claim to completely understand what someone's lived experience is. I can do my best to kind of see what might be operating and influencing, but his lived experience of that might be different. He may feel that that's what brings him meaning in his life. And I guess who are we to tell him what he should or shouldn't do with his money? And I don't know if he necessarily feels like he's playing God with it. Maybe he just feels like he's helping people. And that might be something that gives him a sense of purpose. Now, if he's expressing that it's a detriment, then that's the opportunity in the open window to maybe offer advice or feedback on that. I will say this, just from a transit perspective, Jupiter right now, the host of his sun is in Gemini, in exile. And it's about to move into Cancer in June. And I think that for all of the Pisces, Sagittarius, Jupiter-ruled people out there, having your host, Jupiter, go from its exile to its exaltation is a dramatic shift in fortune. Like going from like being in the outhouse to the penthouse type of thing. So I would say my advice, if you're as a friend, you might tell him that June could bring some really positive manifestations for him. And I don't know, if I guess balance is the key, right? Let's see. Sundancer says, my opinion, he was keeping those people from obtaining faith that God will take care of them since he's always jumping in to fix their lives. My Pluto is exactly opposite his sun in Virgo 28. I have to unpack that statement. There's a lot to unpack in that statement, Sundancer. Like, and I don't know if I have the time and grace right now to do that. What I will say is that erring on the side of compassion and helping your fellow person is, I don't think, ever a mistake. I think that if he's not suffering from that, then maybe he's actually doing, maybe quote unquote God is working through him rather than, blocking whatever manifestation that you think God is not taking in the people who he's helping. You never know who could be an instrument of the divine or of nature or whatnot. I personally feel we are co-creating with the divine. God just doesn't just do stuff without us, having a role within it. Yes, you could argue there are these miracles that happen, but I consider myself a mystic. I think there's a spark of God within all of us, and we may work through, that spirit may work through us. And I don't know I don't even know if I know what that is. You can call it God, you can call it the universe, you can call it the divine, you can call it the force, but it works through us. And if we're not instruments of that force, then what are we doing here? It sounds like he's a pretty good dude that helps people. So why are we dragging him? Maybe we should be thanking him. Maybe we should be showing our appreciation for how selfless and how giving he is. Maybe that's an example of how we should be in the world rather than like dragging him for sharing his resources with other people, Sundancer. I think that we should, I think we should appreciate people like that who are willing to give rather than just exalting the illusion that everyone has to pull themselves up, quote unquote, by their own bootstraps every single second of the day. Sometimes people need help. And yes, there is a balance between those two things. I totally get it. The Virgo part says, well, let's cultivate sufficient skill to take care of ourselves. And sometimes that can create that dynamic. If it's unhealthy, it can create dependence. I have a Piscean father, not Pisces III, but there were times when that person, my dad, he's very self-sacrificing. He's a very kind person. I think what you're hearing from me, Sundancer, and I apologize if I get too emotional about it. I think I'm kind of feeling like, subjectively defending someone like my father, because my dad's a really kind, giving, generous person, and the Cancer in me is like, how dare you say anything bad about my Piscean father? I think, and that's not what you're doing. So, but I will say that it's just funny how that works sometimes. I will say that sometimes that energy, when my dad bailed me out of all sorts of challenging situations, there came a time in my life where I had to say, I don't need your help right now, Dad. I need to learn how to do this myself. And I'm going to try this on my own. And that was healthy. So it's a balance between those two things. And every situation is different. Every person that you're describing that person is helping may have a unique circumstance that we have no idea about. And unless we know exactly the ins and outs of everything about that relationship, what I would do is I would take every single circumstance as individual and unique. And maybe with that Black Moon Lilith, he's learning to share his abundance. We don't always completely understand what someone's journey is. and what could seem really like toxic to us could actually be what that other person needs to learn. So I guess that's what I'll say about that. But we'll we'll get through it. Sometimes it's hard when we feel strongly about a certain way of living and we see other people living in a different way. It just depends on whether, first, if the way that they're living is making them or others suffer, and then secondly, are they coming to us for help or not? Because if he's not coming to us for help, no matter what we do or say isn't going to change that circumstance. But leave the door open for someone like that to come to you, even if you're a friend, for help. But I wouldn't push it on them, if that makes sense. Ani says, Neptune sounds like enchantment is over, but the spell remains. Yeah, absolutely, especially in Aries. Sun Dancer says, I appreciate your comment. Oh, thanks, friend. Well, I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the discourse and the opportunity to examine some of those things. Like, astrology it's not necessarily a cure-all for everything. I think it can give us some insight into what influences we have, but we've got to make choices along the way. And I think that there are times when we have to take action, and then there's times where we need to surrender. And living into those answers, I think, is a really great approach. All right, so we've got Mercury going into Aries, conjoining Neptune, okay, and then we have the Sun from the 19th to the 20th moving into Taurus. So here we have the movement of the Sun into Taurus. This almost instantaneously makes the Sun square Mars. What I didn't mention is that a day or two before that, April 17th, Mars moves into Leo, which is kind of a big deal. It wasn't on my banner notes here, but finally we have Mars escaping the clutches of its fall in Cancer. The good news, excuse me, that's the good news. The challenging news is that it immediately moves into an opposition with Pluto square with the Sun. So a little bit of an out of the frying pan into the fire type of experience with Mars moving into Leo. But the Sun in Taurus 1, we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go along, but the Sun in Taurus 1 talks about feelings of scarcity that lead us to take action, to lead us to begin to plan. So we may be feeling some tension about becoming visible versus maybe it feeling scary to be visible, but we may need to do so anyway in service of planning for our material future. So that's what I'm seeing with this here. Sun Dancer says, he's a wonderful man. I worry that many are taking advantage of him. That's all. Thanks again for your feedback on that. Yeah, all you can do is support him. I think all you can do is just show him love, appreciation, and I think that's the best way to support, is just to create that reciprocal care that he's giving out. Like, show him some of that kindness, and I think that's a great way to do that. I've been trying to do that with my dad, who was a very self-sacrificing Piscean type, just appreciating everything that he's done for me, and that just cherishing the time that I have with him as he ascends into his elderhood. That's the best way, I think, to show that love, is appreciation. All right, so we got Sun moving into Taurus, squaring Mars, the 19th through the 20th. It's going to be exact. The opposition with Pluto, it's going to be exact on the 23rd. Okay, but before that, we have a couple things. We've got a quarter moon on the 20th here. So right as the Sun ingresses into Taurus, we have like a last quarter moon that's going to activate that giant T-square between the Sun in Taurus, Mars in Leo, and the moon and Pluto in Aquarius. A lot of fixed energy. I guess I would suggest that try not to get too stubborn about anything in this particular alignment. You may be feeling some feelings of insecurity with your resources, which is understandable. We've got a lot of new tariffs coming that may change the price of goods and services moving forward. And that's creating a lot of anxiety and fear for the future. We have some fear of visibility, of speaking out, because there has been a lot of oppression of voices recently. Like speaking out and in service of things like diversity has become, I don't know if it's become dangerous, but it's become litigatable, I guess, by the new administration, and that can be scary and frustrating. So I do think that we are going into a period of time where people are going to be having a lot of feelings about resources, about scarcity, and all of the topics that we've been discussing here today, I think, are antidotes and mitigations to that. Like, how do we reclaim some of our agency? How do we create abundance by sharing and creating networks with one another, whether it's locally or on a bigger scale? You know, we are creating a network here internationally by being able to talk over the internet. So we're sharing ideas. It's an exchange of wisdom. So all of those things are good antidotes for that. The Sun in Taurus 1 is also represented by the Five of Pentacles. And in it, they show two people that have fallen on hard times through injury or illness, but they're outside of a church, a stained glass window in the snow. And sometimes that card can indicate some kind of divine intervention. So sometimes there's something that happens that helps move you forward, even when things looked bleak. And that could be part of this story that's unfolding as well. We get to the 21st, Saturn is conjoining the North Node. Okay. That could increase our ability, well, not our ability, but our necessity to commit to our dream. It could increase our responsibilities. It could bind us to some of the sacrifices that we are now becoming aware of moving forward that are necessary. Venus is also going to be hanging out there too. Venus is very close. It's going to conjoin the North Node itself on the 24th. So really, I think this is an opportunity to increase our hope, but to take action with it, to make it real. How do we make our hope real? How do you get your hands in the dirt and make something real and take that vision and turn it into something that can actually help people? So we got the Sun square Pluto here on the 23rd. A continuation of the T-square that we're talking about, but this to me is more about the collective creating circumstances that make us feel nervous about our material resources. Maybe it's through technology. Maybe it's through some of the changes internationally that we've been seeing between nations. But this too shall pass. It's a temporary type of experience. It's not necessarily a long-term transit. So a little bit of a sticky day because we've got the Mars-Pluto opposition that's happening on the 26th here. But the 26th is kind of an important day. 26th is a day where Mercury is exiting its retrograde shadow at about 9 to 10 degrees of Aries, simultaneously while Mars is opposing Pluto. I would expect some important messaging coming this way. When Mercury does one of two things. When it exits its retrograde shadow, or when it emerges from under the beams, oftentimes we'll get some interesting messages, especially in this case, we're going to be breaking some new ground. So we've been going through a period of review and revising over the last few weeks with Mars, with Mars retrograde, but also with Mercury and Venus retrograde over the course of the early part of 2025. And now we're going to be breaking some new ground with Mercury. So this is something where I think we're going to be starting to move forward once again. Again, the Mars in Leo essence is one of feeling offended if you're not respected, or your individual desires running headlong into the needs of the collective with the Mars-Pluto opposition. So I would be very careful about feelings of entitlement, of feelings of Well, I said it, so I'm going to stand by and dig my heels in type of experience. I've been guilty of that in the past. Like, I'm a Leo ascendant, and the challenge of pride is one that many Leo folks will constantly have to wrestle with. And it's not even that we're not aware of it either. It's just like any other astrological influence, you've got those two, like angel and devils on your shoulder. And one, the angel of Leo says, be dignified, like rise above it, have a regal disposition. Don't stoop to the level of conflict or whatever it is. The other, the devil, is saying, how dare they speak to me that way? And, I deserve respect, damn it, and I'm going to dig my heels in. And that doesn't always lead to good outcomes. And that energy can get really supercharged when you have the opposition with Pluto. You might be running into the real needs of a collective that, yes, it may feel like your individuality or your royalty is being questioned or your authority is being questioned, but sometimes you just have to let go. You have to step down off your throne and do what's best for the collective. And I think that I feel like sometimes like Pluto might even be more, have the upper hand in that circumstance, just because of how slow it moves, etc. So there may be some sacrifices that have to be made in service of a collective reality. And then finally, that'll bring us to the new moon in Taurus on the 27th. So this is the new moon in Taurus, 7 degrees of Taurus, squared Mars. So again, another lunation squared Mars, but this time from Leo to Taurus. And then there's the big T square with Pluto here. The good news about this new moon is that it's hosted by Venus at its maximum degree of exaltation. So this is another circumstance, and I just had a really nice conversation with someone about this, where some really, really good things can happen, but it could simultaneously be playing out while there's some very challenging things happening. And that's just the nature of life. Like, you could receive some beautiful benefits, but that could also lead to some things that are going to need to be overcome. So I guess be grateful for the good things that are coming to you through Venus and the Pisces area of your chart, for the abundance that is the seed of abundance that's being planted in the Taurus area of your chart, and allow that to carry you through the challenges of the Mars-Pluto opposition. We'll talk more about this in a future broadcast. All right, friends, that's what I've got for you. There I am. I've got a hexagram and an animal for you to wrap things up for the day. So let's check out what we've got here. The hexagram I got for you is number 64. Now, if you remember, if you're a fan of the show, we've had 64. That's not the hexagram. Where did it go? Sorry, I think Mercury's trying to get me one more time. There it is. There we go. So, what is the essence of the full moon in Libra 3 in 2025? I asked the I-Ching, and I-Ching gave me hexagram number 64, which we also received for the month of April. So a repetition of the theme, and it is, of course, April. So that message from the I-Ching is like, hey, you should pay attention to this. And 64 translates to before completion, not yet across, before the end, nearly home and dry, bringing order out of confusion, exercising caution and circumspection. So this is where we have a situation of chaos that we are trying to bring order to. And they compare this in the I-Ching to a little fox that is crossing a river, and it's almost across to the other side, and it's crossing like ice, and it has to step very carefully. But if it goes too fast, it'll break through the ice. So we are in a tenuous situation right now where we're potentially trying to get across to another side of some sort, whatever that is. And we have to be very careful. We have to step lightly, I guess. Jack Balkin says, you face a difficult situation. The elements for successful change are there, but everything seems confused and unsettled. It is up to you to bring order out of chaos. Does that sound like Libra 3? It sounds like Libra 3 to me, being the eye of the storm, right? It is a great responsibility. The problem is you don't yet know what to do. There are contradictory indications and contradictory forces at work in the situation. You feel tugged at from all sides. It sounds a lot like Jupiter and Gemini. Yet you must make a decision. The text compares your situation to that of an old fox that is trying to cross a frozen river. It does not know where the ice is too thin. Therefore, it proceeds slowly and cautiously, listening carefully to the first sounds of a crack in the surface. No matter how far across it is, it does not lose its balance or its caution. By contrast, a young fox lacks this prudence and circumspection. If it rushes ahead boldly when it is necessary, when it is nearly across the river, it may fall into icy waters. So we have to be careful. We can't rush through things. We are dealing with an Aries sun, but if we rush too far into what we're doing, we could make mistakes. Here's an example. As a gardener, a little bit of planning, measure twice, cut once type of experience, I think can bring us a better experience. Like reading the directions before you start assembling something can save you a lot of a headache, right? Making a plan. Like for us, one of the things we're doing is we are making a plan as far as where we're going to plant things and whether they are companionable, like plants. Some plants do a lot better with other plants. Like you don't want to plant tomatoes with corn. You want to plant corn with beans and with squash, the three sisters. And they have a complementary reciprocal relationship with each other. And doing a little bit of that research first can save you a lot of headache and create better outcomes. And I think that this is what this hexagram is trying to teach us. Now, the animal I got for you is the fly. We've had the fly before on the show. The fly is interesting because a lot of times people really hate flies. But I was telling you, this animal serves a purpose. This animal breaks things down. This animal cleans up the messes that we see. Like it literally eats shit. You know, we talked about the poop jokes earlier. If we didn't have flies, we just have piles of shit everywhere, you know? So maybe this is the animal that's helping us clean up a mess, whether we created it or whether it was created by someone else. So this animal can symbolize change, growth, persistence in reaching goals. Flies are very persistent. Their populations increase rapidly, with females laying up to 500 eggs at a time. And it's an indication that you're productive and can have great accomplishments in a short period of time. They prefer disgusting meals and love garbage and manure. This is a sign to keep your environment clean. The fly uses its antenna to smell and can fly up to 45 miles an hour. This symbolizes that your acute senses and ability to move quickly when necessary. So this animal can also represent feelings of irritation, little things that irritate us potentially, right? So sometimes what we need to do is, there we go. I've had this thing that I recenter myself. Sometimes we let little things bother us, and a fly has like these kind of these eyes that have like 4,000 smaller eyes within them. And it teaches us to see things from an alternate perspective. And Libra is a great sign that can help us see things from someone else's perspective. So we may have been working very hard at our own individual goals, but we might need some feedback from someone else to help us through this period of time, potentially at this Libra full moon. So how do we see things from a different perspective? How do we see value in things that other people consider trash? That's what fly can teach us. So this is a great animal for cleaning up messes, for seeing things from a new perspective, and for getting things done quickly that can proliferate into something very large in a short period of time. Rachel Fletcher says, when I see a fly, I try to draw on Jeff Goldblum wisdom. Well, that's interesting, Rachel, because Jeff Goldblum is a Libra sun. So I can't do an impression of. I feel like he has this kind of like thing where he does things with his hands, but I'm not even going to attempt to Jeff Goldblum. But yeah, go check out either Jurassic Park or The Fly, and to get some of his best quotes. All right, friends, that is what I have for you today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you for hanging with me with some of the technical difficulties earlier in the show. Please, if you have a chance, go check me out on social media at Spencer Michaud, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, etc. Blue Sky. You can also find me at spencermichaud.com. Reach out there for a reading if you need some help moving forward into these new astrological and physical waters. And I hope that you all have a wonderful full moon, one day at a time. Try to take it easy. Try not to get sucked into all the turnings of the wheel. Try to connect with the hub and try to be the change that you want to see. Be the centered, calm, peaceful person that brings energy and reciprocity, that brings meaningful exchanges. Lead with gratitude, lead with sharing, lead with kindness. And I think that you'll have some of the better outcomes in this world. All right. So thank you, friends, for hanging out. It says Jeff Goldblum also has a curious Uranus. Thanks, Spencer. Oh, thanks, Ani. Have a great weekend. Have a great week ahead. Have a great full moon. And I will see you next week, next Friday, I hope. I think we're going to start talking about Neptune and Aries in more depth. So I will see you all the next time. Remember, be kind to yourself as you go through these changes and be kind to one another. And I'll see you the next time. Peace.